Peoples of Latin America and the world demanded truth, justice and reparation while commemorating the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances. ALBA-TCP Ministers of Tourism and Culture held a joint meeting focused on initiatives to defend regional identities in the face of the imposition of commercial hegemonic entertainment culture. Celebratory gunfire was heard across the Afghan capital after the Pentagon and the Taliban separately confirmed that the last U.S. troops had left Afghanistan. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your host, Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news, and we have fresh informations because this August 30th marked the International Day of the Victims of Enforced Disappearances. It is a date that serves to draw attention to the many people across the world whose whereabouts remain unknown. The idea to mark this International Day came from the Latin American Federation of Associations for Relatives of Detained Disappeared, a non-governmental organization founded in 1981 in Costa Rica as an association of local and regional groups actively working against secret imprisonment, forced disappearances, and abduction in a number of Latin American countries. The United Nations observes the day each year to raise awareness of the use of enforced disappearance as a strategy to spread terror within different societies. As the UN noticed, enforced disappearance has become a global problem and also is not restricted to a specific region of the world. And as part of the events to mark the International Day of the Disappeared, the Glorieta de los Niños Héroes monument, located in the Mexican city of Guadalajara, was renamed the Roundabout of the Disappeared by the relatives of disappeared persons in Mexico. Enforced disappearances are a frequent phenomenon in the country. According to figures provided by the National Search Commission, over 90,000 people are reported as disappeared in Mexico.
Hopefully, if so many people pass by here, hopefully somehow someone will stop and look at them. It is a way of honoring their memory. There they are not forgotten. If the authorities have already forgotten them, we, as mother or as a society, we shall not forget them because they are and we are here too. To come here is to cry out what we often could not do, to feel a little, perhaps, consolation, to know there is my son and to cry out to them, he exists, listen to us.
In Argentina, an event marking the International Day of the Disappeared saw a street in Buenos Aires renamed They Are 30,000, Son 30,000, on the site of the former detention and torture center of the country's last military dictatorship. An estimated 30,000 people were disappeared in the dirty war waged during Argentina's 1966 to 1983 military dictatorship.
We always remember them, but today in particular, and above all, our beloved 30,000, because they are 30,000.
Colombians demonstrated in the capital Bogotá against extrajudicial killings in an event marking International Day of Victims of Enforced Disappearances. A special court investigating Colombia's decades-long armed conflict found in June that the military carried out at least 6,402 extrajudicial killings between 2002 and 2008.
This is a struggle that we have so that mothers do not continue to mourn the disappearance of their children. We hope that God will help us in the struggle, and we hope that tomorrow our children and grandchildren will be able to run freely through the cities and the countryside without fear that the army will assassinate them.
We all know who gave the order. The issue of justice in this country is very complex. Let's say that the authorities and institutions work so that it is not known, but I think that in the hearts of the people we already know who it is, and what we have to do is to continue informing, telling the people about it, so that if there is no justice, at least there is truth.
And now we move on to other topics. Armed robbers hit several banks in a small Brazilian city on Monday, using locals as human shields while leaving a trail of explosive devices, and also shooting at police in an assault that killed at least 3 people. The attack around midnight in Aracatuba, a city of roughly 200,000 people in the interior of Sao Paulo state, is the latest in a series of increasingly violent bank heists in Brazil. Experts claim a COVID-19 pandemic welfare program for poorer Brazilians has encouraged robbers to plan bold raids in sleepy regional cities, where bank branches are storing more cash. The executive secretary of Sao Paulo's military police reported that more than 20 heavily armed men carried out the attack, using 10 cars. The attackers used drones to monitor the streets as they entered the city, hit the banks, and made their getaway. In the midst of the global environmental crisis, major phases of financial capital, such as the tycoon Bill Gates, are promoting geoengineering projects. However, environmentalists, indigenous people, and scientists warn that the manipulation of the climate could have even more devastating effects on the Earth's ecosystem. From Sao Paulo, Brazil, our correspondent Ignacio Lemus brings us more details.
The latest report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warns that over the next 2 decades, the global average temperature will rise by 1.5 degrees Celsius. The result is extensive devastation, which is already visible. Deforestation and burning areas for land use are among the main sources of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, while fossil fuels come in second place. So in Brazil, what we need is to allow the vegetation to grow and focus on a much stronger energy transition. However, as the crisis unfolds, the response of the faces of finance capital, such as Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, was to develop a series of technologies to manipulate the climate and alter the Earth systems on a large scale. So-called geoengineering encompasses different projects ranging from pumping carbon dioxide into the rocks and seas to fertilizing the oceans, the use of gases to whiten the clouds as the way of bouncing the sun's rays, or the aerial spreading of chemicals to remove greenhouse gases that affect the atmosphere are among the most controversial aspects. So every year we'll be dealing with the problem with solar geoengineering instead of dealing with the root cause by reducing emissions. As you do this, the amount of work you have to do with geoengineering, the amount of chemicals you have to use has to increase, and there will be side effects. Environmental, scientific, and indigenous organizations denounce that the miracle solutions of geoengineering would mean potentially devastating damage to ecosystems, increased droughts, extreme weather events, and the disruption of food production. They also warn that technologies will concentrate power in climate interference, and the impacts will be mainly seen in the global south.
International climate change as a solution to existing climate change is not only reckless, it is insane. It's repeating the same mindset that got out into this crisis in the first place, and the worst thing is that they are using sulfates, and those sulfates will eventually return to the earth as sulfuric acid and acid rain.
The Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment, (XCOPEX), intended to conduct solar geoengineering experiments in Sweden in 2020, but demonstrations of environmental organizations managed to postpone its launch until 2022.
Ignacio Lemus y Julian Asif para TeleSUR.
The use of leaded petrol has now been eradicated from the globe. This milestone will prevent more than 1.2 million premature deaths and save world economies over 2.4 trillion annually, according to the United Nations Environment Programme.
Because leaded fuel illustrates in a nutshell the kind of mistakes that humanity has been making at every level of our societies. the kind of mistakes that have brought us to the triple planetary crisis, the crisis of climate change, the crisis of biodiversity loss, and the crisis of pollution. So the success we note and celebrate today provides some clear lessons on dealing with environmental challenges, lessons of the need for independent science, for innovation, for free media, and for clear and objectives and goals.
We'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. This Monday saw a meeting of Ministers of Culture and Tourism of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty. The meeting sought to outline strategies to face common challenges among the member states of the bloc. Participating were ministers from Venezuela, Bolivia, Cuba, Nicaragua, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dominica, and St. Kitts and Nevis, via video conference with the aim of developing new joint strategies that will allow sustainable and viable tourism initiatives among ALBA member states. In the cultural sphere, ministers focused on initiatives to defend national and regional cultural identities in the face of the imposition of hegemonic cultural globalization.
For being host of this meeting with our brother Ali Padron.
Addressing the ALBA-TCP meeting, Venezuelan Minister of Culture Ernesto Villegas stressed the challenges facing the region.
Our region lives a crucial moment. We have to advance in the midst of the most complex difficulties because of capitalism and its effects in the climate change that has resulted in a collapse of the climate and the consequences of the coronavirus pandemic in our societies, which has affected all our agendas of our countries. Traditionally, we have the negative effects as a result of the coercive measures denounced by us in every space we are, measures that express the decision of the imperialism to fight all the projects of our alliance.
Meanwhile, Cuban Minister of Culture Alpidio Alonso stressed that the cultural heritage of the peoples of the region must be protected.
We have the duty of safeguarding the cultural inheritance of our nations, to protect their traditions, to guarantee the conditions for the development of our nations, and to achieve, as Fidel said 60 years ago, that art and culture to be a real inheritance of the people.
Also addressing the bloc, the Minister of Tourism, International Transport and Maritime Initiatives of Dominica, Denise Charles, stressed that Caribbean peoples must work together to address their common challenges.
Caribbean people, we go through the same challenges, we are vulnerable to the same shocks, and so the greater we can support each other to strengthen our cooperation, trade, and to learn more about each of our cultures, we can definitely build a robust tourism industry just among our member states.
Bolivian Minister of Culture, Decolonization and Repatriation, Sabina Orellana Cruz, explained that the country has recovered the rights of indigenous peoples.
The state has created a new constitution that, despite recognizing the fundamental rights, it recognizes and it establishes the collective rights of the peoples. So in this sense, our country is established as a state that recognizes the cultures of the indigenous nations and the culture of life to live better. During 14 years, we had a task to build the plurinational state, decolonize the state with a new horizon. However, 2019, because of economic and political interest, we suffered a rupture with the coup d'etat.
The Bolivian minister also noted that solidarity among different peoples must be strengthened to protect cultural heritage.
The arts and the cultural expressions as mechanisms to recover the historical memory of the peoples and to create new societies with solidarity, to strengthen communication strategies between our peoples, to strengthen our ways and procedures to protect and to preserve the cultural inheritance in the Bolivian state, to build mechanisms of international relations in the framework of the diplomacy of our peoples.
We have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Celebratory gunfire was heard across the Afghan capital early Tuesday after the Pentagon and the Taliban separately confirmed that the last U.S. troops had left Afghanistan. The final stage of the withdrawal, a frantic mission to evacuate tens of thousands of Americans and Afghans who had helped the U.S.-led war effort and which left scores of Afghans dead in the suicide attack last week, brings an end to the so-called war on terror launched against the country 20 years ago. However, analysts have noted that the new enemy, the ISIS-K group, is likely to be used as justification for continued U.S. and foreign interference in Afghanistan, with military bases built up around the country. Taliban chief spokesperson Sabidullah Mujahid took to Twitter to announce that the last U.S. troops had left the country, noting that Afghanistan had gained full independence. Meanwhile, Anas Haqqani, a senior Taliban official, said he was proud to witness these historic moments. On Sunday, 9 members of one family, including 6 children, were killed in a U.S. drone strike targeting a vehicle in residential neighborhood of Kabul. According to the U.S. Central Command, a defensive airstrike was carried out in the Afghan capital, targeting a suspected ISIS-K suicide bomber who posed an imminent threat. Neighbors and witnesses estimated that there might have been up to 20 people killed in the strike. The U.S. military has since acknowledged that there were reports of civilian casualties, while also warning of possible further attacks as evacuations went down.
My only little daughter, who was 2.5 years old, was killed. 3 children of my brother were also killed, 2 boys and a girl. My older brother's 3 children, who had just returned from work, were also killed. A young niece was also near the car who was killed. A guest of ours, who was also here, was killed in the accident, bringing the total to 10.
And Mexico received 86 asylum seekers from Afghanistan this Monday. This is the third group to arrive in the country since the beginning of the chaotic evacuation operations from Kabul airport. The newly arrived group is mostly made up for media workers and their families. Some are Qatari and UK citizens who work as correspondents from the Wall Street Journal. Mexican Foreign Ministry officials disclosed that the group will be tended to by private sponsors and also civil society organizations. Among the asylum seekers who were previously taken in by Mexico are a team of 5 Afghan women internationally recognized for their research in robotics, and another group of media workers linked to the New York Times.
Tonight, we are receiving one more group of Afghan nationals. They are employees and their families. Reporters, on the instructions of Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard, have coordinated with the federal government agencies, with the National Migration Institute, to receive them tonight. Mexico welcomes them with open arms, and we hope they can find the protection they so badly require. Tonight, we are receiving one more group of Afghan nationals. They are employees under...
Authorities in Venezuela announced an expansion of the mass vaccination campaign this Monday and proposed new goals as part of the fight against COVID-19. In statements to the press, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez informed that efforts to vaccinate the population will be tripled as the country seeks to immunize the population as quickly as possible. She explained that the program will be expanded in the over 400 vaccination centers installed across the different health institutions, while 179 new vaccination points will be opened. Starting on September 5th, adults over the age of 60 will no longer require a previous appointment in order to be vaccinated.
First of all, between August 30 and September 5th, those people over 60 years of age who have not yet been vaccinated can go to any vaccination center and they will be vaccinated without an appointment, as has been occurring through the Patriot platform without needing an appointment. The elderly, our grandfathers, our grandmothers, we need to finish vaccinating those over 60 years of age. Why? Because it is well known that they are our most vulnerable population.
China's ambassador to South Africa, Shen Xiaodong, accused the U.S. intelligence community of political manipulation after a report in which Beijing was accused of withholding key information about the origins of COVID-19 pandemic.
Like all countries in the world, China is a victim of COVID-19. And we all hope to identify the source of this virus as soon as possible and stop its spread as early as possible. First, origin tracing is about science. No country has a right to disregard life, politicize scientific issues, and smear other countries for political interest.
And the WHO Regional Director for Europe, Hans Kluge, warned of a forecast 236,000 COVID-19 fatalities in Europe by December 1st, and said the stagnation of vaccine uptake in the regions is of deep concern.
Several countries are starting to observe an increased burden on hospitals and more deaths. Last week, there was an 11% increase in the number of deaths in the region, with one reliable projection expecting 236,000 deaths in Europe by December 1st. Vaccination is a right, but it's also a responsibility. The stagnation in vaccine uptake in our region is of serious concern. Now that public health and social measures are being relaxed in many countries, the public's vaccination acceptance is crucial.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.